ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. O Ramakrishna, the establisher of the eternal religion, the embodiment of all religions and the best of all incarnations, we salute thee, bowing our heads before you. In the last reading class, we stopped at page number 370 of this great book, Ramakrishna the Great Master. We shall continue reading from there today. And the author was discussing how Sri Ramakrishna was back in Kamarpukur, his village, and how he is reacting with the public there. In order to fill the cup of happiness to the brim, a messenger was sent under the instruction of the ladies to Jairam Bhati, the village of the master's father-in-law, to bring his wife, bring Sharda Devi. The master knew it, but did not express either approval or disapproval. It had fallen to the lot of his newly married wife, to have seen her husband once only after their marriage. It was when, according to the custom of the family, the master was taken to Jairam Bhati on one occasion when she was 7 years of age. But she was then too young to understand what marriage meant. Therefore, the only thing regarding the event that was retained in her memory was that when the master came to her father-in-law's father's house in Hriday, with Hriday, the latter, that means Hriday, brought a good many lotus flowers from somewhere, sought her out, this 7-year-old girl, because she was his elder brother's wife and she has to be worshipped. So sought her out from a secluded part of the house where she had hidden herself, and while out of bashfulness she shrank into herself, worshipped her feet. She was also telling another thing. So when Sri Ramakrishna was talking to her, he told her, if somebody asks you when you are married, you don't say you are at 7 years. She was 7 years old at that time. Tell at 5 years. 6 years after this event, she was taken to Kamarpukur in her 13th year. This time, she spent a month there, but she had not the good fortune to see either the master or her mother-in-law, as both of them were away at Dakshineshwar. It was just a custom. She paid a visit to father-in-law's house, Sharda Devi. She came again 6 months later to her father-in-law's house, but could not see either of them. For the same reason, they had not arrived from Dakshineshwar. During a stay of a month and a half, 3 or 4 months had already elapsed since her return to her father's house, when the news came that the master had come and she was to go to Kamarpukur. She had reached her 14th year 6 or 7 months before. Therefore, this was practically the first occasion when she met her husband after her marriage, and when she understood that what marriage was. It seems that the master stayed at Kamarpukur for 6 or 7 months on this occasion. The friends of his early days and all of men and women of the village, known to him, mixed with him as before and tried to make him happy. The master also was very pleased to see them after such a long time. In mingling with men and women at Kamarpukur, in their circumscribed worldly lives, the master felt at that time a joy similar to that felt by great thinkers and scholars when, during their leisure, after hard toils, they join with children in their aimless and meaningless amusements. Just to bring down their mind. Just give a few lighter moments to their mind. But if it may be said without contradiction that he was always anxious that they should become conscious of the transitoriness of this life, and although living in the world, they should gradually attain self-control and learn to depend on God in all matters. So even during his amusements, even during his light talks with the villagers, he was stressing the point that there is something to be done in life, and that is develop love for God and realize the transitoriness of this world. We may infer this from the manner in which he always taught us the very same things through play and fun, to mirth and merriment. So with the direct disciples also, he did the same thing. Through play and amusements, he would be stressing the central point of life to realize God. On finding that even living in the little world of the little village, some had made unexpected progress in religious life, he was struck with wonder at the inconceivably glory of God. He told us many times of an event to illustrate this. What the Master said. The Master said that one day during the period he was resting in his room after his midday meal at Kamarpukur. Some ladies, his neighbors, came to him, sat near him, and became engaged in spiritual conversation with him. The Master suddenly happened to be in ecstasy and felt that he was a fish joyfully swimming and sporting, sometimes coming to the surface, sometimes sinking deep, all in the ocean of existence, knowledge, bliss, Satchidananda. The Master happened to be in ecstasy even while talking with others. Therefore, not at all mindful of it, the ladies expressed their own opinions, which created a sort of noise. One of the company forbade the others to do so and asked them to be quiet till his ecstasy came to an end. She said, he has now become a fish and is swimming in the sea of Satchidananda, existence, knowledge, bliss. If you make a noise, that bliss of his will be interrupted. Although many of them did not believe in her words, all remained quiet. When he came down, Sri Ramakrishna came down from that state and was asked about his experience, the Master said, yes, what she said is true. How strange. How could she know it? It's an ordinary village woman. She has so progressed so much. She can know what is happening inside the mind of another person. The reason why the people of Kamarpukur appeared wonderfully new, it seemed to us that the daily rounds of the men and women of the village of Kamarpukur now appeared new to the Master to a great extent. He now felt like a man who had returned home from a far-off place and to whom every person and object of his village appeared to be new. For although the Master had been away from the place of his birth for a short period of 8 years only, a violent storm of spiritual strivings had raged in his heart during that period and produced a radical change in it. For those 8 years, he had forgotten himself, forgotten the world, and ascended far beyond the bounds of time and space. But while descending from there, he became transfigured with the knowledge that Brahman existed in all beings and found all persons and things mellowed with an extraordinary new light. It is well known in philosophy that our consciousness of the time and the measurement of its duration arise from the succession of our mental functions. Therefore, a short period during which a great many thoughts rise and sink in our minds appears to us to be very long. If we have got too many things to worry, then a short period becomes very long, like suffering from a disease. Then the night is only about for 5 or 6 hours, but it appears as 2 days. The night does not pass at all because the worries are so much. Every minute some 4 worries arise in a sick man's mind. So he finds short period of a night equal to perhaps several days. He simply prays how this night should pass away. So because of the succession of thoughts in very quick succession, that is what the author is telling. Therefore, a short period during which a great many thoughts rise and sink in our minds appears to us very long. One is astonished to think what tumultuous waves of thoughts and emotions surged in the master's mind during this period. Is it therefore surprising that he said the said period should appear to him to be an age? Though it was only 8 years, he felt he was away for an age away from his village. The master's eternal relation of love with the people. One is astonished to think of the wonderful relation of affection in which the master bound up all the people, men and women of Kamarpukur. The men and women of all families, including those of the Lahas, the Brahmins, the blacksmiths, the carpenters, the gold merchants, and so on, were all bound to him in a relationship of reverential love. We were charmed to hear the master on many occasions speak with great pleasure about the devotion and affection for him of a large number of men and women. Example, the simple-hearted and devout Prasanna, an old lady, the widowed sister of Dharmadas Laha, the master's friend Gaya Vishnu Laha, the son of Dharmadas, Srinivas Shakari, of sincere faith, the devout ladies of the Pine family, the master's Bhiksha Mata Dhani, who gave Bhiksha alms to him during his investiture of sacred thread. The blacksmith woman, Dhani, belonged to the blacksmith class, and others. He remembered all of them and their kindness, their behavior with him. All of them remained at this time almost always beside the master. Those who could not do so on account of household duties or other business used to come in the morning or midday or evening whenever they had leisure. When they came, the ladies brought with them various sweet and delicious dishes and left delighted in feeding the master. Felt delighted. We have given the reader elsewhere an indication of how the master, although living in the family at home and surrounded by the people of the village who behaved so sweetly, always remained divinely inspired. It is therefore needless to repeat it here. The master began to do his duty to his wife. The master paid attention to the performance of another great duty when he came to this time to Kamarpukur. At first, the master had been indifferent to his wife's coming to Kamarpukur, but now he was intent on giving her education and training for her well-being. Knowing that the master was married, Totapuri, his teacher of Advaita, who initiated him into sannyasa, had said to him one time, "What does it matter? He only may be regarded as really established in Brahman, whose renunciation, detachment, discrimination, and knowledge remain intact in all aspects in all respects, in spite of his wife being with him. He alone may be regarded as having really attained the knowledge of Brahman, who can always look equally upon both man and woman as the self and can behave accordingly." So the test of the highest man of realizer of Brahman is he will take all people as only self, never man or woman. So for him, what does it matter if wife lives with him, wife does not live with him? Others who have the knowledge of difference between man and woman may be sadhakas, aspirants, but are still far away from the knowledge of Brahman. The above remark of Totapuri came to the master's mind and induced him to test his knowledge attained by spiritual practices extending over a long period, as well as to look to his wife's well-being. So he wanted to teach his wife. To teach his wife, he has to live with his wife. So he wanted to live with her, to test how his knowledge of Brahman had lifted him up above all the sense of man or woman. Whether he has attained that state, he wanted to test himself also. So two things in mind he had. One, to instruct his wife. Second, to test himself, how far he is advanced in the knowledge of Brahman. The success the master attained in it. The master could never neglect or leave half-finished anything he considered to be a duty. The same held good here also. He did not stop at partially educated his girl wife, who depended entirely on him regarding everything of this world or of the other. He was from now on especially mindful that she should learn household duties, know people's character, put money to good use, and above all, surrender all to God and be an expert in behaving correctly according to place and time and circumstances. We have in many other places hinted how far-reaching was the result of the teaching which the master imparted to her, placing before her his ideal life of unbroken continence. Therefore, suffice it to say here that the Holy Mother, as she is called by the devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, was happy and continued in all respects to have the master's pure love, devoid of the slightest tinge of lust, and could offer her lifelong worship to him as her chosen ideal and follow his footsteps and mold her life accordingly. So Sri Ramakrishna tried to make her a real counterpart of him in all his spiritual matters also. And he also wanted to teach him the mundane matters of how to live in the society, the behavior in society, etc. also. The Brahmani's apprehension. The Bhairavi Brahmani had also accompanied Sri Ramakrishna to the village, Kamarpukur. The Bhairavi Brahmani did not, on many occasions, understand the master when he went forward to do his duty to his wife. We have seen that she tried to make the master give up his resolve of being initiated into sannyasa when he came in contact with Totapuri. She did not like him to become an Advaita. For love of God, she thought, would be completely uprooted from the master's mind if he was so initiated into Advaita. Some such apparition took possession of her heart even now. She, it seemed, thought that it would be prejudicial to the master's countenance if he mixed so intimately with his wife. Like common people, he may also fall from his vow of celibacy. But the master could not now, any more than on the earlier occasion, comply with the Brahmani's instruction, which greatly wounded her feelings. He did not care, so he went ahead with his own program of teaching Sharda Devi. It wounded the feelings of this Brahman. This gave rise to egoism. Which was aggregated into pride and vanity, which now made her often lose faith in the master. How step by step this, first of all, her feelings got wounded. This gave rise to egotism. That means I am a big lady, I am the guru of you and you are not listening to a merge. So that sort of egoism came, which was aggravated into pride and vanity. So that egoism, that I am superior to you, it became great pride and vanity, which now made her often lose faith in the master. The master was such a great sadhaka, was achieved success in 3 days in every branch of Tantra. She forgot all that work because of the vanity and the pride. We were told by Hriday that she openly expressed the feelings from time to time. For example, if anyone raised a question before her on any spiritual matter and said that he would ask Sri Ramakrishna and have his opinion on it, she would flare up and say, what can he say? What can Sri Ramakrishna say? It is I who have opened his eyes. I have told you about this one. Why do you want to go and consult? That is the idea. Or she would scold the women folk of the family for trivial reasons and at times for no reason at all. So she became so proud and she was behaving in a very peculiar way. But the master remained calm in spite of such words and oppressive behavior of hers, and did not cause having devotion or paying reverence to her now as before. Instructed by the master, the Holy Mother paid the Brahmani the respect due to her own mother-in-law and always engaged herself in her service with love and devotion. And knowing herself to be an ignorant girl, she did not protest against any of her words of action. So Sri Ramakrishna digested all her sort of a bad behavior, and Holy Mother also fell in line with him. She also forbore all the insults, etc. by the Brahmani. The Brahmani's power of discrimination was ruined. When pride and egotism increase, the intelligence of even a clever man gets clouded. It does not then take long for that pride to get knocks and bumps at every step. When, however, it is knocked about in that way, a man with some sense left in him knows its evil effects, gives it up, and follows the rising curve of his life again. Such was the case with the learned Brahmani. For unable to behave rightly with reference to persons and circumstances, under the influence of that pride, one day she created an awkward situation. The incident came about like this. We have already mentioned Srinivas Shankari. Although not born in a high caste family, Srinivas was higher than many Brahmins in respect of devotion to God. One day, during his period, he came to the master for the purpose of having Raghuvir's prasada, food. It needs no mention that the master and all members of the family became very happy with Srinivas in their midst. The devout Brahmani also was pleased to see Srinivasa's faith and devotion. They talked on various devotional topics till midday, when the offering of food to Raghuvir and other deities were finished, and Srinivas sat down to take food. When he finished and was ready, according to prevalent custom, to clean the place where he had taken his food, the Brahmani forbade him to do so and said, "We will do it ourselves." At the Brahmani's importunities, Srinivas had no alternative but to leave the matter there and go home. He left the leaf plate on which he was eating, left there itself, and he went away to his home. In the villages, dominated by strict observance of social rules and regulations, great quarrels and party feelings are often roused on account of the breaking of these rules. Small social rules, if somebody breaks, so it creates a big problem in the village circles. And such an event was going to happen now also. For the Brahmin women who came to visit the master raised great objection to the cleaning of the leavings of Srinivas by the Bhairavi, who was a Brahmin woman. So Brahmin caste, being higher caste, they should not serve the lower caste by removing the leaf plates, etc. So these women, they objected to Bhairavi's cleaning the place where Srinivas Shankari had eaten. The Bhairavi did not admit the propriety of their objection. Bhairavi, though she was a Brahmin, she did not follow all the social rules. She was a sannyasin, above all rules, and she was a highly realized spiritual soul. So she saw God everywhere. So she did not care to observe all those rules. So she did not care for the advice of the other Brahmin ladies. The Bhairavi did not admit the propriety. The quarrel gradually increased. Hriday, the master's nephew, heard of it. Knowing that a great quarrel might arise over the trifling event, Hriday asked Brahmani not to violate the custom. But she paid no heed to his words also. So she was proud, you see. So she did not pay heed to his words also. Hriday got incensed. And there grew up a noisy quarrel between him and the Brahmani. Hriday said, "If you do so, we won't allow you to remain inside the house. That means we will outcast you. You cannot live in our house of Brahmins." The Brahmani also was not the sort of person to let the matter drop, and she said, "What harm if you don't? Manasa will go to bed in Setala's room. I will go and live in somebody else's house," she said. All other members of the house mediated, and entreating the Brahmani to refrain from the cleaning brought the quarrel to an end. The Brahmani recognized her mistake. Although she refrained, the Brahmani's pride was severely wounded that day. When her anger subsided, she thought calmly over the matter and understood her own mistake. She thought that when she was committing such blunders again and again, she should no longer continue to stay there. When the eyes of an aspirant possessed of keen insight fall somehow or other on his own heart, no impure ideas can conceal themselves from him. That means all the defects in our own heart we can see when we are introspective. So when Brahmani became introspective, then she could find out her own blemishes. That was the case with the Brahmani now. She studied the change of her attitude towards the master and found herself at fault there too and became very repentant. She was never so unjudicious about her behavior with the master. But she was, because of her pride, now she could realize that mistake. A few days passed when one day she made garlands of various flowers with her own hands and smeared them with sandal paste, and having beautifully adorned the master as Sri Gauranga, asked his forgiveness with all her heart. Afterwards, controlling herself carefully and offering her heart and soul to God, she left Kamarpukur and took the path to Kashi, the abode of the Lord of the universe, Vishwanath's place. Thus did the Brahmani take final leave of the master after having spent 6 long years with him at a stretch. What a great lady! 6 long years she spent with the master. The master spent about 7 months in various spiritual moods at Kamarpukur and returned to Dakshineshwar, probably at the end of 1867, when he had regained his health and was almost as strong and healthy as before. An important event happened in his life shortly after his return. We will present it to the reader now. We come to the new chapter. Chapter 18, the Master's Pilgrimage and the Story of Hridayram. Mathuranath and his wife were now getting ready to visit the principal holy places of northwestern India. A day for the starting of the journey was fixed in the month of January, and it was settled that many persons, Mathu's Guru's son and others, should go with him. Guru means family Guru. His real Guru was Sri Ramakrishna, but his family Guru, so his son etc. also would accompany him on the pilgrimage. Mathur and his wife made importunate request to the master, Sri Ramakrishna, to go with them. Consequently, Sri Ramakrishna agreed to accompany them with his aged mother and his nephew Hriday. So his aged mother also went with him, though some people are of opinion she did not go. But Hriday said she did not go, but others say she did go. Mathur started with the master and others on an auspicious day, January 27, 1868. Our January 26th is the Republic Day year. It was January 27. If there was Republic Day, then it would be the day after the Republic Day, 1868. We have told the reader many things about the Master's pilgrimage elsewhere. We shall therefore briefly mention here what we heard about this pilgrimage from Hriday. The arrangement about the pilgrimage. About 125 persons in all. Imagine a tour of 125 persons at that time. Sri Ramakrishna, his mother, Mathu, his wife, his daughter-in-law, his guru's son, Hriday, a Brahmin cook, a gatekeeper, and men servants and women servants started to visit the places of pilgrimage on that occasion. 125 people get encouraged to the pilgrim spots. 1 second class and 3 third class carriages were reserved for them by the railway company. And it was arranged that whenever Mathur liked, they should detach those 4 bogies at any place between Calcutta and Kashi. So much of privilege with the railways. Railways only, it was a company only, East India Company. So that company, if you pay money, they are ready to give any privilege. So Mathur had money, he gave money and arranged these 4 bogies, 1 second class and 3 third class compartments for these 125 people. Whenever they want, they can detach it at some station, stay in the station itself and that will serve as their house. They visit places, come back into the compartment, then they start again. So it was like the saloon of nowadays. They extremely rich people, they hire a saloon in the big trains. That saloon by itself, you can stop anywhere, proceed at any time on the rail line to any place. So at that time, Mathuranath was so rich, so influential, he could arrange like that. Then he was free to detach those bogies anywhere between Calcutta and Kashi. Mathur and others visited Sri Vaidyanath at Devgarh on the way and rested a few days there, where an important event occurred. The master's heart became filled with compassion on seeing the miserable plight of men and women of a poor village there. He requested Mathur to feed them one day and to give a piece of cloth to each of them, which he did. There may be several hundreds, if not more than 1,000 or 2. So, for so many people, he asked Mathur Babu to give them all one cloth, wearing cloth, and feed them all full stomach on one day. So, when the description is read, so in the description we find there were hundreds and hundreds of them. Mathur pleaded, I am not carrying so much money. I have money, but I am carrying money for this, for the tourage in a limited way. If I spend so much money on giving charity here, I may be in trouble. But Sri Ramakrishna said, all right, then you can proceed in your own way. I will not proceed further from here unless all these poor people are fed and clothed. What a wonderful compassion of Sri Ramakrishna. So, Mathur had to oblige. He had to send people to Calcutta, get the clothes, get money also extra. He had to obey Sri Ramakrishna's order of doing relief work. So we usually historically record the history of our relief works to this incident. It is Sri Ramakrishna who started the relief work of Ramakrishna Math and Mission. And later on, they multiplied, and today everyone expects relief work from the Ramakrishna Mission. From Devgarh, Mathur went directly to Kashi. Nothing important happened on the way, except that when Sri Ramakrishna and Hriday got down at a certain station near Kashi, the train started before they got into it. Maybe for attending to nature's call or pissing, they must have got down. And Sri Ramakrishna was in his own mood, so he took his own time. By the time they came back to the train left with Mathur Babu and others. And they were two stranded there. In those times, there were very few trains and they are stranded on the way. So It became, the train started before they could get into it. Mathur became anxious and wired from Kashi. When the train reached Kashi, Mathur came to know. So from there he wired, and that instructed the authorities that Sri Ramakrishna etc. should be sent by the next train. But they did not have to wait for the next train. Rajendralal Bandyopadhyay, an important officer of the railway company, arrived there on supervision duty in a special train shortly afterwards, and seeing them in that plight of getting stranded because they were late and the train started off earlier, took them with him up to Kashi. It was a God-ordained thing that there was no knowing that some officer would come at that time, exactly at the time when Sri Ramakrishna wanted some lift. So he got the wanted lift from this Rajendralal Bandyopadhyay. And Rajendralal Bandyopadhyay was the resident of the Bagh Bazar quarter of Calcutta. That is why he knew Sri Ramakrishna perhaps to an extent. So he must have thought it was a great privilege to see this great man reach Kashi without much difficulty. So he took him into the special train by which he was going, and almost more or less after a few hours they reached Kashi, and Sri Ramakrishna was back again with the tourist party. So this incident shows that godly help was always there with Sri Ramakrishna. There are other incidents in his life also. In one place, they were there in West Bengal itself. On the way, they were to go by one train. The station, they were there in station, Hriday and Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna suddenly said, "No, I want to attend to toilet. Let us go to the nearby open space." So Hriday said, no, train will come within a few minutes. We may miss the train. No, I have pressure, I must go. So there was no other way. He went there. By the time he finished the toilet, etc., it was so late that the train should have puffed off. And they thought that they have to wait perhaps for a few long hours for the next train. But when they came to the station, they found the train was also late. And it came at the right time when the Sri Ramakrishna came to the station. So Sri Ramakrishna's life, we find so many things. All they appear like accidents, but they are all real incidents. This great person was helped by every force on this earth, divine force and other good people's gratefulness to him, devotees' love for him, and the public's love for him. So every type of force was in his favor whatever he wanted to do. So we see such many more incidents in his life in our next reading. So today we will stop here itself. Niranjanam nityamanantarupam bhaktanukampadrita vigraham vai Ishavataram parameshamedhyam tam Ramakrishnam shirasa namamaha. O Ramakrishna, the taintless one, the eternal one, the one with infinite forms, the one who has assumed his form for the sake of devotees, the incarnate of the Supreme Soul, and the adorable Lord of all. We salute, bowing our heads to thee. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.